Hello, everyone. My name is Jake. Welcome back to the Seriously podcast featuring myself, an entrepreneur, uh, two dogs, maybe two cats, and my amazing business professional co host, Jolie.
Hello.
This week we are going to be talking about work life balance. And if you see animals all over the screen on YouTube, um, don't be shocked. And if you are on the audio listener, go check out our YouTube page, Faux Productions, FUX Space Productions. You can see a giant chocolate lab, a demon dog fighting a cat. There's all sorts of stuff going on the screen. Animals. Animals, animals, animals. Anyway, we were going to talk about work-life balance this week. And as you can see, our work-life balance is fantastic with our animals here today. But I wanted to kick off this conversation with the kind of generational comparison of work-life balance. At least what the newer generations look at it as versus older generations, at least in the U.S., right? And something I wanted to start with is back in the Gen X generation, the boomers, things like that, you had a more generational understanding that a lot of people work life balance. It was you wake up, you do your education in your younger years, you get through your education, and then you work every day, have a family, have a couple kids, retire at 60 or 70, and that was it. End of the story. You
And you
know?
only had a few years left before you died.
Yep. And I think something that's very interesting is this new shift I see with my generation and the generation just before mine and the dogs, apparently, where every single person, or at least a majority of people I see and know,
No me.
look at work-life balance a lot more in favor of life. You know, they want shorter hours, they want retiring earlier, and I know a lot of people who, instead of getting a position for monetary gain, even, I know people who go for a position just because they love doing it. You know, finding the life in work, not just the work and work and work and work for a goal that you don't know, or a goal you don't personally value. And I do think that's a very interesting shift in the broader understanding of business because I think we see all these articles about like Gen Z people entering the workforce and then quitting almost immediately. Or being in a position for not long and then being blunt when they're like, yeah, I'm not going to work more hours just because you told me to work more hours if you're not going to pay me for more hours, and then things of that nature. I think that's a very interesting story, or many stories you hear about those newer generations when you see the articles of millennials are killing bakeries or whatever, and the many, many other stories in relation. But overall, to get past this rambling, it's the idea that at least younger generations seem to view the work-life balance more tilting towards a life than tilting towards a work, if that
Well,
makes
and
sense.
it there's a lot there to unpack that you
Yeah,
were
I'd
talking about.
rambled.
That's okay.
I just went on. The
So
dogs were in our
so
faces.
here's the thing. Let me address one thing and then we'll move on to the other. The concept of you need to pay me more to work more hours. Okay, I may enlisted a lot of hate from your listeners, but if you're an hourly employee, meaning you are on the clock, they track your time, how many hours you work, and you get paid for the number of hours that you work. That
Mm-hmm.
might be a waitress, that's going to certainly be somebody in a factory, somebody in a lower level administrative role. That's very different than when you're in a professional job and you get paid a salary.
Mm-hmm.
When you get paid a salary, if you work 45 hours a week, I pay you your salary.
Mm-hmm.
If you work 30 hours a week, I pay you your salary. And the benefit of being in a professional role or exempt in the US labor law space is that you get the benefit of more freedom and me not docking your wages.
Mm-hmm.
But you get paid to get the job done, not paid to work a certain number of hours.
Mm-hmm.
As a general rule, when you're new coming in or even people just working, I expect you to work 40 hours. Most work weeks are based on 40 hours. But if you're in sales, if you're in HR, if you're in accounting, if you're, in IT, you might consistently work more than 40 hours a week. That's fine. I probably work a lot more than that because I never start my day later than 7 a.m. I'm very rarely done when I get home at 6:30, and I work on the weekends.
Mm-hmm.
So if I were to say how many hours do I work, attorneys would be used to this. I probably work 60 or 65 hours a week. I make good money because I work to get the job done, and I'm accountable for getting the job done. So this might go back to some of our other meetings around leadership and stuff. To me, that's not the hours that you work are work-life balance, but you've got to understand what you're signing up for before you pick a particular profession.
Mm-hmm.
If you're owning your own bakery, you're probably not working 40 hours a week. You're probably
Mm-hmm.
getting in there really early. You're probably staying really late. You're probably balancing your books on Sunday if you're closed. Your job is a little bit different because you have groups under you. But, if you were to put together all the time that you prep, all the time that you edit, you're probably working more than 40 hours a week.
Well, and
You
some,
like what you're doing, so it might not feel like it.
yeah, that's what I was gonna point out.
Yeah, but for me, let's talk about the traditional idea of work-life balance. So, as you talked about, there's three phases primarily in life. Phase one is I'm getting education. That might end at high school. That might end at college. That might end postgraduate. If you're a doctor or a lawyer, that might end not until you're almost 30,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then you have your earning years, and then you have your retirement years, and then like birth, we're all going to die, right? And so our bodies wear out. I mean, we're just not meant to be immortal. We're not like trees that are going to live thousands of years, right? Our time is short. And so from my perspective, work life balance has never been about maybe, oh, no, it has never been about, I want my earning years to be shorter. I want my earning years to be shorter too, yes, but that to me is not necessarily work life balance. Now, maybe for your listeners, to me, work life balance is during my earning years, do I do enough that feels like I'm living my life and not just working?
Mm-hmm.
And for the profession that I have picked and the different jobs that I have had, there's been many years that I would say I had no work life balance. There was a period of time back in the 2010, 2012, 2013 timeframe that I traveled 3 weeks out of 4. And I went internationally. I missed vacations. I missed everything for my kids at school. I was not, you couldn't count on me to be home. I didn't get to put my kids in bed at night. I didn't get to take them to get their haircut. I didn't get to take them to the dentist. I mean, I had to rely on my husband to do all of those things because I prioritized growing my career to get as far as I could so that I could have greater earning potential
Mm-hmm.
and hopefully retire with greater savings and greater retirement. That was what I prioritized. I'm not suggesting that other people should prioritize that, but that's what my husband and I decided to do. Now, on a flip, my husband gave up his career because we needed to have somebody at home to be there for the kids, to take them places, to get them up and get them off to school. And that didn't fall on me because I was the income earner. Some people may pick that. But as I evolved and I started to realize that maybe I didn't want to go as far as I have ultimately gone, I started to say, how do I live my life today? How do I make sure that, sure, my day starts, I'm up before 5, I'm on the road to get to work before 6, I'm at work before 7, I work until 5, 5:36. A lot of times in my hour drive at home, I'm taking calls. Sometimes I sit in the garage or in the driveway finishing up a call at 7 o'clock at night. That's not ideal. I wouldn't push anybody to do that, but if that's what you want to do, great. But for me, a lot more of it has been, well, how do I have a different type of work life balance in that? Is there a day a week that I could work remote so that I can see my kids get off to school, so that I can always, I'm fairly good about having dinner with the family. Now, sometimes they don't eat until late because I'm late getting home, but you've got to figure that out. And certainly, I would say I have now said, I'm not giving up any more vacations. I have literally been on vacation and had to leave and fly to a meeting and then fly back to my vacation. I've literally had days in the middle of my vacation that I've had to work all day from the hotel because something popped up and I had to deal with it. If you move up, and we already did a podcast about leadership, if you move up and you're a leader and your scope as a leader gets bigger, let's say you're a director or a VP or an SVP, that will be your life. So be thoughtful that you want that for the right reasons, because there is so much that you give up in order to have that level of a job.
Well, and something I wanna get, sorry, not to
That's
cut
okay.
you off, but I think something that almost comes to mind as you're talking about this is I think work-life balance is a term used broadly. When I
Yes.
really think work-life balance is an
Yes,
individual-based
it
thing.
is. Yes.
And I think different generations have different definitions.
Even people within generations have
Yeah,
different
yeah, yeah.
definitions.
And I mean, I look at it like this, right? Because what you've described just to me, right? That's something that for me, I understand. Like the goal of go for the financial, get as far as you can in the career, right? And to me, I would do something similar. But my difference would be I have to enjoy what I do a lot, right? Or at least find a way to enjoy it, you know? And the way I look at it is I look at it like this, right? Because I have my own business that I run and I do all these things for this business. And as you talked about it, for all those hours I put into it, I don't even think of them as work hours because I like doing what I'm doing in it, you know? And I think from a person to person basis, that'll be very, very different because I think a lot of people, at least in my generation, who talk about wanting a work life balance are on those hourly salaries right now or the hourly day to day things because a lot of businesses you enter into immediately, at least those early positions, are hourly, right? And I think I know a handful of people that are very much of the idea that when I clock out, I'm done, right? And
Well, and I
clocking
would
in and
say if
out,
you clock in and out, when you clock out, you are done, because
yes,
doing any work that you're not being paid for is illegal.
I agree.
Yeah.
However, and I wanted to get into this, there are businesses that will subtly encourage you to work after you clock out or to
And that's
stay over.
wrong.
I have
Unilaterally, that is
I
wrong.
agree. I have a very interesting story about this in college. I had a close peer who worked at not a gas station, but some sort of small kind of convenience store, right? And they had to close up most evenings. Well, not close up, but
Close down. Shut
close
up.
down for the evening shift person to come in and watch through the evening. And a lot of times that evening person would take a while to get there, right? And there was this interesting conversation they had with their supervisor, whoever their boss, right, where they were sitting in the office and they hadn't clocked out yet, and it was past when they should normally clock out. The reason they didn't clock out is the next person hadn't shown up. So they didn't want the place to get robbed. They didn't want anything like that. So they stuck around. They're like, I'll just wait to clock out until that next person shows up. And their boss reprimanded them for it, saying, you have to clock out at 5 because we're not going to pay you overtime, yada, 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 yada. And they're like, okay, well, I'll clock out at 5 then. So they clocked out and they left. They closed up, made sure everything was locked, and they left. Unfortunately, what happened is because they left and clocked out like their boss told them to do,
They got in more trouble.
they not only got more trouble, there was a break in at the store that evening because the other person didn't show up. So then the boss blamed them, and they almost got into a legal battle about this, which fortunately, the boss didn't actually go through with because they wouldn't really. They had the text evidence and things like that. There wasn't anything they could really do, even if they went for it, because I'm pretty sure this individual would have
But
won.
it probably ruined their employment from that point on. It was probably never
Exactly.
the same.
And I think it's crazy
That's
because
the
it's
example of a
like,
bad boss. That's a
yes,
bad
which we talked
boss.
about a little bit in the
And not
last
only are they bad,
podcast
but
episode.
they're telling you to break the law.
Well, and the thing is, that's a lot more common, especially in those smaller hourly positions
Yeah.
people in college and high school take. And I even remember I had a position that I eventually stopped doing, it was a volunteer based position where I volunteered at kind of this thrift store, right? And I remember multiple conversations where I would take a lunch break off or something to go get food because, I had a lunch break I
You
was
weren't the
allowed
only
to
one
take.
in their office, though.
I wasn't the only one
Yeah,
there. No,
yeah,
there were
okay.
plenty of people there. But I remember several moments where I had to take a lunch break real quick or I went off to have lunch, right? And I'd be gone for 30 minutes and come back. But I remember the person who advised me there would reprimand me for eating lunch for 30 minutes despite being allowed to in the agreement that we had when I signed up for
That's
that
a bad
volunteer
boss too.
position.
That's not good. That's
Well,
not
and there
good.
were multiple times where they would be like, "We need you here at all times. You can't leave. You can't do yada yada yada."
Especially a
Mind you,
volunteer where you're not
yeah,
being paid.
volunteer position, mind you.
This is probably why they could never staff that place. Would be my. I don't know if they could or couldn't, but they probably had a hard time getting
They
people
did
to
have
work
a hard
there.
time staffing that
Yeah.
place because me and another person who were there pretty consistently, and there were
And you said
benefits
you were
to.
a kid,
I
so
was
in
a
high
kid. I was in
school,
high school,
it's ridiculous.
right? And I remember there was another person who I worked alongside with there. I don't remember their name or anything particular about them, but there were benefits to this location. And what I thought was so interesting about this particular location was they would get things donated to them to give out, and they would be like, "Oh, we can't give this out. No one's going to take this or no one's going to buy this," right? So they would just throw it out where it would be like, and I'll give an example. There was a book that they got, a book by, or at least co-authored by, um, the actor for Indiana Jones. I can't remember his name.
Harrison Ford.
Harrison Ford, where he co-authored this book about cinematography. And I was super in the film at that time, and I was like, oh, that's a very interesting book. And I went to stock it, and they were like, oh yeah, we're not going to sell that. Throw it out. And I'm like, well, that seems kind of wasteful, you know? And there were multiple times in that where they actually gave us stuff because they didn't think
Couldn't
they
sell
could
it.
sell it.
Well, and maybe they couldn't. I mean, they know their business model better, but not to be rude, how's this work life balance?
Exactly, right? Like I'm sitting here and but here's the thing. I wanted to point that out because in this volunteer position, I was in a
Mm.
position where they made me clock in and clock out in this volunteer position. They made me physically write my name in when I showed up and when I left. And they micromanage the hell out of me and other people working in this volunteer position, despite the fact we were volunteers and we were doing it in our free time. So when I had to leave, say, an hour early for some school event, or I had to go have dinner or something like that, whenever I had to leave for whatever reason, and this was during the summer, so it wasn't super often, but I remember they would micromanage the hell out of you and then be like, "Why'd you leave early? Why are you coming in an hour later than you said?" And it's like, to some extent, sure. But every time I would run into a situation like that, I would tell them at least a few days ahead of time that it would happen, and they would still be upset.
So, how long did you volunteer there?
I don't remember. It was
Probably not very long.
only a couple months, I believe. Because eventually, at some point, I just was like, I don't want to volunteer at this place
Mm-hmm.
anymore because of how they're acting
Mm-hmm.
around these people, or they treat the people who are volunteering in this position. But that's an example of, and this is very different because it's volunteering, and there are different caveats and things like that. But that's not an uncommon story to hear in hourly
Well,
positions.
and so I would say we've digressed into like what's legal and what's not legal. In a volunteer position, they're not paying you. I mean, I guess they can choose to have you write your time down. Maybe they're doing that for insurance reasons. Maybe they're doing that
Yeah.
for staffing reasons. I mean, I don't quite know. Um, but in the example of the convenience store, it is illegal to have you work off the clock if
Mm-hmm.
you're an hourly person. So, um, in one of the podcasts we talked about this. You can try to influence it. Obviously, it sounds like he kept good notes. He had texts or whatever. That's a situation where, quite honestly, if you point it out, and someone's going to get pissed when you say, "Look, I know that it is illegal for me to work off the clock.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to do something that's going to get you and me in trouble." He might have gotten fired for that. I don't know. It sounds like he had a terrible leader, so
Mm-hmm.
maybe he would have. But you don't want to stay in a situation like that because that's just not okay. And you need another job before before you quit your job. I get all of that, but um, you know, that to me is a little bit different than work-life balance. That's just bad leadership, and you should never do something that you think is immoral, unethical, or illegal. Those are just your counterbalances. But
Well, and I do think you say the reason I bring it up in this work life balance episode is because that's the examples people give of when their work life balance is threatened.
well, and maybe I guess the examples that I hear are more like my experience of I'm never off, right? I could get a call at 8 o'clock tonight. I often get texts. It's a Sunday. I get texts on Sunday. All these things coming up from peers, from people on my team, from my leader. And I have to be on all the time. I'm constantly checking my cell phone. That to me is not great. I don't love it, but I knew that I signed up for that when I went into the position that I'm in.
Hmm.
So, how do I find other ways of making work life balance? It's probably a different issue than the issue for your listeners, which is more, first I would say you need to know and set your own criteria.
Hmm.
What to you is work life balance? And you said this, each person has their own thing. Even if you love what you do, you probably need to understand, because not you can't work 20 hours a day every day for years.
Hmm.
It's going to kill you. Even actors and stuff that work, they're on 20 hours a day, they work for 3 or 4 months and then they don't work the rest of the year, right? So you need to have some time to recharge. You have to have time to do something other than work. You have to eat, you have to sleep, you have to do all those things. But you also have to live your life. And I think where I see, not I don't, I'm not interacting every day with entry level professionals, but you do need to understand what's important. Usually you're going to have the best balance early in your career. That's
Yeah.
going to be when you have the best balance. But, it is very common, and I have people come to me, usually they're not the strongest leaders, and say things like, for salaried people, not for people who are clocking in and
Yeah.
clocking out, but they'll say, he gets here right at 8 and he leaves right at 5. Everybody else is here, 7:30 and they're here till 5:30 or 6. And I'll say, "Okay, does he get his work done? Is he getting his work done?
Hmm.
Or is he not getting his work done?" Because as an exempt person, you can't manage how many hours they work.
Hmm.
What you can manage is, are they getting their work done? And so there are some people that are really, really efficient. My husband, as an example, who was in the insurance industry, I think his job would be hourly and then it would go professional and then it would be hourly and then it would be exempt. So he was always swinging. Did he need to truck his hours or he didn't? Many years he worked from home. Um, but his situation was he was really, really efficient. And so he would say, I get so frustrated because I get twice the work of everybody else and I can get it done in 6 hours instead of 8. So they just keep giving me more.
Hmm.
And in your career, you'll find people like that. They can take what should be 8 hours of work and make it 3 days worth of work. And you'll have people that get 8 hours of work and they'll be done in 6 hours. And so the leader should be thinking about that differently. But you need to learn how to pace yourself. You need to understand what's important to you. Are you a morning person and you want to get up and work out and have all that time in the morning for yourself before you work? Or do you say, I want to get there right when it starts and then I want to be able to stay a little bit later because I'm a night owl and I'm going to be up until 10, or that's the night out for me, 1 o'clock in the morning. And so getting to work at 8 makes it, before 8 makes it hard.
Hmm.
You have to figure out what's important to you and then live within that. But I think, it's all about balance. It's about, what do you value and are you getting to spend the time doing things outside of work that are important to you? I tell everybody, take your vacation. If you get 2 weeks vacation, if you get 3 weeks of vacation, you get 4 weeks of vacation, whatever you get, take your vacation. The best way to use your vacation wisely is to put it around a holiday if you can.
Well, and what's interesting is like, just to jump in on your vacation thing, this is why there's some European countries that force you to take
Yes.
vacations, right? Because I don't remember which ones exactly, but I know at least
France. France is
France, is
one
it
of
France
them.
that
Yeah. I
forces you
think
to
the
take
Netherlands.
the
Yeah.
vacation? I know there are multiple places that literally will not let you
You
work.
shut the whole thing, everything shuts
Yeah, they
down.
just
Yeah.
will not allow you to operate because it's like you have to take these breaks. You must take these
They're like
breaks.
national. I think even Sweden has like a national where they all go skiing and stuff. It's been a while since I've had a Swedish company, but I can remember like the whole company shut down for that week of ski
Hmm.
season or something. But I'm really bad. It's easy, do as I say, not as I do. I never take all of my own vacation. When my kids were little, I did, because I would save vacation because they'd get sick. Somebody would have an ear infection. You had to take time off because, something happened back home with your parents. Somebody died. You had to have travel time because sometimes you need more time than a day or two of bereavement or whatever. So I hoarded my vacation and I had to use it to cover life situations because I didn't have PTO bank. I had vacation. And some places, depending on the state, you might have sick time too. But think about your vacation. Schedule your vacation if you can. And I always like to schedule my vacation. Like if I've got a Monday off, maybe I'll take Friday, Thursday, or Friday, Monday, or Friday, Tuesday, or Tuesday, Wednesday. Because if you can elongate those weekends, suddenly you have so much more time to do something. And your vacation could be a staycation. You hang out at home if you're a book reader, or you want to catch up on movies, or you want to do a home project, or you want to work on your car. But it's also like going and being around the people that you value. If you've moved for your job, take that time to go back home and visit people. Um, I have one person that has works for me now, and I'm always amazed. She takes days off to like go and like do self development. Like one day she took like a writing class at a local community center, and it was on a Tuesday, and she goes, I'm going to take Tuesday off because I'm going to go and do a writing class. And I thought, she's married, no children, a little bit later in her career, and I thought, that's brilliant. I wish I thought to do something like that. I always think, oh, when I retire, I'll do these things. Um, but I think you've got to do that. Now, another thing that's hard to do too, if you think about work-life balance, and I have gotten better at this, although I have had a leader in the not too distant past that basically um, tried to shame me a little bit with this. But there are always deadlines, things that are coming up. You've got a big project, you've got a go live, you've got something that's happening. I plan out my work and I work my calm down, sweetheart. I work my work to that because I have learned I can get it all done really early, which might create rework or other people aren't caught up. And so I really try to use my project manager to keep myself on task. But sometimes you have to let things go. So real life personal experience, we had a big presentation that I was responsible for putting together and delivering. And I had it done 2 weeks in advance. There was plenty of time to tweak it. There was plenty of time to do some revisions. I put it together. I gave it to my leader. My leader looked at it and said, I'll get back to you in a couple of days. A couple of days later, I checked, and then I started checking every day leading up to the presentation. A week before the presentation, I said, is there anything that needs to change? Because I'm going to be off. I've got something scheduled the night before the presentation. So I am not going to be able to work late that night. I gave it to you 2 weeks in advance because I don't like fire drills at the last minute. Yeah. I'll make some tweaks on it. 2 days before the presentation, because the day before I'm going to be gone, right? I said again, is there anything else that's needed? Because keep in mind, when I leave today, you're not going to have me to work on anything. Is there anything that you need for the tweaks that you want to make? Blah, 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 blah. No, we're fine. The night before the presentation, I go offline because I have something that I have to do and I'm offline. He's texting, he's sending emails. I'm offline. I told him I was going to be offline. I got up in the next morning because I was offline for a reason, so I went home when I was done. I went to bed. It was my thing that I needed to deal with. The next morning, I got up a little bit early because I wanted to prepare. There were I'm not exaggerating when I said there had to be 15 texts, 5 or 6 emails, and I felt really bad. I felt really bad because I thought, oh my gosh, he didn't have the things that he needed. I have an hour drive to work. By the time I got to work, I was kind of mad because I'm like, I did everything that I could possibly do. And you
Mm-hmm.
know what? When he walks in this morning and he is all over me about how I wasn't available, I'm going to say, you know what? I had that to you 2 weeks in advance. I touched every day leading up to it. I told you I was going to be off. I'm not going to own that. Now, be careful how you do that, right? Because, that could be insubordination. And so he came in upset. I had to stay up until late and I fell asleep and all this. And I said, you know what? I said, I really am empathetic, but I'm not going to own that because I told you that I had something that I had to do for my family and I was going to be offline. I gave it to you 2 weeks in advance. It's not like I sprung it on you. I think it's horrible that you had to stay up. I'm really sorry for that, but I'm not sorry for anything that I did. I don't own that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, he kind of looked at me, was not very happy with me. What was your presentation? I said, that's why I gave it to you 2 weeks in advance. Now he walked away and left me alone, but I'm not saying necessarily do that. But prioritize and say, you know what? If I've done everything that I can and I have some time off for whatever reason, maybe I just wanted to go get my nails done. That's immaterial. It was an evening, it was my time off. You got to learn in work life balance to say, I'm not going to carry that with me. I'm going to let that go because at some point in time, other people need to be responsible for themselves. So I think that's really a good thing. And it's hard for me to ever disappoint because I don't want to disappoint, but I stood back and said, in the bigger picture, this is one time, and there's 1,000 other times that I have worked all night and gotten up the next morning and worked all morning to get something done. So you know that what this one time, if you haven't ever read the book How Full Is Your Bucket, that's about putting things into your bucket.
Mhm.
So when you need to take out, you still have stuff in your bucket. So all these passes. I think that's important in the bigger picture too. I can't take vacation because of X. There will always be a reason that you can't take vacation. And I'm not saying all of those reasons are not really valid reasons. Sometimes you can't take vacation, but you'll never get that time if you don't take it. If you don't schedule it, if you don't tell people that you're going to take it, plan it so that you know that it's happened. Sorry, there was something stuck on the dog's butt. It just seemed to fall off. I don't know what it is, but we'll figure that out later. Um, and I gave the example of how I managed my work. Get your work done early if there's prep processes. Don't make people chase you because when you make people chase you, you're creating a situation where you're not going to have balance. And you do need to prioritize and say, this is the time I do this in my day. This is the time I do that. If Christmas is important to you, prioritize your time off at Christmas. If it's the 4th of July because you love to do stuff in the summer, prioritize that. And figure out how you can utilize your weekends as much as possible. I'm not saying that nobody ever works on weekends or your days off, whatever, maybe you get Monday off or instead. But figure out how you can really prioritize those fun things on those days because you're going to have peaks and valleys. And to think I'm only ever going to work 8 hours a day every day, unless you're on the clock and you don't want to do anything illegal, that's probably not going to be the case. Now, not everybody has a leader who has this philosophy, but like I'll tell my folks, let's say they've worked really hard all week long and they've put in a lot of really long hours.
Mhm.
We have kind of a group call on Friday morning, and I might say to a couple of them, not usually all of them because they're all not doing this, but I may say, you know what, Bob, I know that you put in a lot of hours this week. Maybe you can get off today at noon. Do you think there's any way you can sneak out today at noon? Maybe just have a little bit more time to your weekend. A lot of times Bob will say, I can't do that because I've got meetings up until 5. Okay, maybe next week then. Think about how you can reprioritize your time so that you can get just a little bit more time away to balance that out.
Well, and something I wanna talk about too is there is, and I know I have it, and I have a peer who's in my business who also has this, but we're both mad workaholics,
Mm-hmm.
where we
I am too.
will take for no reasonable reason. We will some days we will wake up at like 8 and we will work from 8 to 8 with no breaks for whatever reason. Now for me I know this is me personally because for me it's a lot more day dependent. Some days I'll wake up and I can do the work 15 people can do by
Mm-hmm.
myself in a day. And some days I wake up and it's like I can't even manage to write a single word. Some days it's whatever. And in those cases, I am of the position of I understand that that's how just my workflow works,
Mm-hmm.
where it's just vastly some days I'll wake up and do everything, some days I'll wake up and I'll delay because that's just how I am. But I think what's important, especially in work life balance, is understanding your own almost production
Yeah,
thought
you got
process.
to know you and how
Yeah.
you work and what's important to you. I
Because
agree.
I know this friend, I've had to tell them multiple times because they're doing design for one of our projects. And I've had to tell them at some of our meetings that we have on Saturdays, I had to tell them, hey man, take the week off.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And he's like, yeah, but I got to do this. So I'm like, no, take the week off.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to if you need me to, I will forcefully remove you from the drive for this week so you can
Mm-hmm.
take the week off because I know if I don't do that, they'll just be wake up, work 12 hours, wake
Mm-hmm.
up, work 12 hours, wake up, work 12 hours. Where Sometimes you just need to take a step back and realize, okay, you know what? Maybe I do need like a day
Well,
break
we
or
all
a
need a mental
2 day
health
break
day.
or a.
And most companies don't give you mental health days. I mean, we're talking a lot more about trying to be more progressive, and there's also mental health services, and I think
Mhm.
sometimes everybody needs that. Everybody needs that because something is happening. But I really do try to prioritize my Saturday and my Sunday. Um, I will typically say I will not work Sunday morning.
Mhm.
And whether we're going to church or we're doing a podcast or something else, my Sunday mornings I'm very selfish of. Doesn't mean I don't carry my freaking cell phone everywhere I go. And my family can tell you, even when we're on vacation, I have that freaking work cell phone with me all of the time. I try to leave somebody in charge while I'm gone, but you just have to figure out what works for you. I think we talked in another earlier podcast about you're never for your entire career you're never going to have work life balance every single day.
Yeah.
So you've got to figure out what those peaks and those valleys are. And if you're in a job that you can't get the balance that you need no matter what, you're in the wrong job.
Mhm.
But you also have to be realistic on what are your expectations. There are 24 hours in a day, and I hate it, but I learned this at the right hand of the master when I was coming up in my career, and I do use it when people say to me, and I get a little frustrated, not so much with younger or newer talent or individual contributors, but with my directors and above who say, "Oh, well, I didn't have time." There are 24 hours in a day.
Mhm.
I expected you to get it done. You told me you were going to get it done. The fact that this, that, or the other happened, you still had opportunity and time to get it done. If you had to work a 10-hour day, if you had to work on your Saturday, you told me you were going to get it done. I expected you to get it done. That's a very different situation than I've given work to an entry level professional and they come to me, 3 o'clock on Friday and say, I've been working so hard, but I didn't get it done. I might, there might be a time of I really still need it by Monday. I'm sorry that you're gonna have to put in some hours over the weekend. Or, you know what, that's okay. I get it. Take the weekend off, regroup. You're gonna meet with me on Monday. Let's meet on Wednesday morning instead. It's all about being proactive about it. But I would say as a general rule, managers don't like being surprised. I don't like the excuse of there wasn't enough time.
Mhm. Yeah, I think it's the idea as well that, and maybe we'll have an episode in the future on this, but this is something I've heard briefly used in a positive sense of the new AI
Mm-hmm.
revolution stuff, which I have some big thoughts on. But a lot of people are utilizing AI for purposes of preparing things,
Yes.
of in
Just be thoughtful. Your
advance.
company may have policies around
Oh yes,
using
100%.
AI,
But
but yeah.
again, it's use the tools available.
Well, and I got to tell you, when I have, and I tell my team this all the time, something very simple won't impact most of your listeners, but we're in HR, somebody wants to open up a job. We've never had that job before. And a lot of my people will get frustrated because they'll say, we don't have the job description. It's going to take me so much time to put together the job description. Not really. If you go out and you Google any job,
Oh
put a
yeah,
couple
it's
of
so
things
easy to
together,
find a
you'll get
description.
15
Yeah.
examples. Pull out some things that you think are right from what you've heard. You can have that tentative job description back to the manager who should be making the job description, by the way. I'm not saying we should, but you can say, hey, here's a template for you. Pick out of there what you want. And it could be 4 pages long and say, you pick out what makes sense because now instead of saying, well, I've been waiting 2 weeks and they still don't have that job description because they don't know how to do that, you can do things like that really quickly. So whoever you're needing input on, you can provide them something to make that more easy for you to get back. And I don't know what I did before Google. There are days I'm like, I don't know, because you can find anything. It might
Hmm.
not be spot on, but even I was preparing to do a training on something, and I was like, I don't have a deck anymore. I left that 2 or 3 jobs ago. And then I went out and Googled it. I'm like, well, that's what I want right there. You just download it. You can convert it from a PDF into a Word document and tweak it and make it your own. I mean, if you work smart and not hard, it is a lot easier to get the balance. But don't wait. Don't wait until the day before and then be scurrying because now you're going to have a 12-hour day
Hmm.
versus saying, okay, I'm going to go out there and figure what's out there. I'm going to download 15 templates. I'm going to save them. And then every day I'm going to look at one or two and then come back and say, this is what I want. We even did this recently. We're putting in a learning management system which has online training modules. There are 10,000 of them.
Hmm.
And I don't want to just open them up if somebody hasn't looked at them and said, is the content good? And so what I did is I took about 500 of them and broke them across 20 people and gave them 3 weeks and said, I'm only asking you to audit the first 2 or 3 minutes if it's bad. If you look at it and you say the quality of the recording is bad or the material is bad or this is not a topic we would ever deal with, just listen for a couple of minutes and then mark it low and move on. But if you find one that you think is kind of cool, none of them I think were more than 15 minutes, please audit the entire session. And then you can say, this is what I like, this is what I don't like, and this is why I think we should put it in there. And initially, when I told my leadership team in HR I was going to do that, they're like, nobody has time, nobody's going to want to do that. And I said, so well, we sell it as this is an opportunity for you to sample it. We want your input. And every single person that we asked to do it, all 20 of them came back and said, I really enjoyed it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what I said when we rolled it out and we did the training is I said, I need you to set aside probably an hour every day for the next 2 weeks for you to get through how many there are. But again, if you don't like it quickly, pitch it. Nope, it's a no, put a big old X and move on. And I'm trusting you to make those recommendations. But that's a lot. If you think about how much that is to get through, if you ask 1 or 2 people to do that, it's astronomical. You wouldn't get anything done but auditing that for 2 weeks. But if you take pieces of it and you say, you're looking at everything that's in one subject, and all you're looking at are the things that are under white belt. All you're looking at are things under staffing and interviewing. All you're looking at are things that are under ADA. I'm throwing out topics that are HR. It is amazing how many you can get through because once you see 1 or 2 good ones, the rest of them are like not as good, not as good, not as good. And I think we did an incredible amount of work in a very short period of time because I had really originally estimated I needed 3 weeks or 3 months to get that done. And because of other constraints, now I was pushed down into like 2 weeks. I was like, I can't do it. I got to get help. Um, and you could argue that I'm lucky because I can just assign that, right? But you've got to figure out how to get work done through others with others so
Yeah.
that you have time. And it's amazing how supportive colleagues are if you just go to them and make yourself a little bit vulnerable and say, I need help. I don't think I can get this done. Can you advise me? You're not saying I want you to do it for me, but can you advise me on where could I go? How can I get this done more quickly? A lot of people have templates already. So people will come to me and say, I don't even know where to start. And I'm like, you know what? I might have a template. Just sit here for 10 minutes and let me see if I can pull that out of my repertoire. Now, you're going to want to tweak it and make it your own, but this is a template that's really close to what you're talking about. And so you don't have to then worry about format and presentation. You just have to find the content. And I do think, and everybody's been there where I need to go to my child's daycare session or graduation or I have this once in a lifetime opportunity to go see this band that I'm really passionate about. Not the day before that you make your problem somebody else's problem, but leading up to it, if you ask people for help and you reciprocate when they need help, I have never found that people won't help.
Mm-hmm.
Especially if you, like again, are vulnerable and say, I need help, instead of, well, I don't have enough time. That's a very different approach. But you need to think about what's coming up and use that planning time efficiently. One of the best things, and I don't think it's even out there anymore, that I learned probably in my early 20s was it was a company called Franklin Covey.
Mm-hmm.
And they actually made daytime planners, and we used them at work, and we all went through it in several days of learning how to use it. And I still use those principles today in my standard work of sitting down and thinking about my day, taking 10 minutes, 15 minutes to say, what's my priority for the day? You can't do that if you have an 8 o'clock meeting and you arrive at 8 o'clock.
Mm-hmm.
Your whole day, you're going to be catching up and you're going to run late versus if you say, okay, maybe it's you're just even sitting with your cup of coffee at your kitchen counter and saying, what are the important things I need to get done? You start with what's the week. Well, actually, you start with the year. Then you go to the month. Then you go to the week, and then you go the day.
Well,
And
and
it makes it very
jumping
organized.
in here real quick, that's very, there's a reason, at least in schools, syllabi exist.
Yes.
There's a
Yes.
reason they give you agendas.
Yes.
It's a great way to organize those type of tasks. Because I even remember when I had an agenda, what I would do is I wouldn't use the agenda, I'd use like a calendar or something. But I would write down the day it's due and the day I would do it.
Mm-hmm.
And normally I'd put the day that I do it like a week ahead. or whatever
Yeah.
and be like, all right, well, I'll work on it this day. And if I need more time, I can schedule more
Yes.
time, you know? And planning it, and I think planning is very good for work life balance specifically.
It is.
Planning when
It
you
is.
do things is very important. One thing I loved from one of my professors is that she worked as an assistant professor. She was actually getting her master's, I believe, when I was being taught by her. But we had a one-on-one one time where she was like, yeah, what I do every morning, because I do poetry, right? And she wants to poetry release stuff. And what she did is every morning at 3 or 4 a.m., she'll go out on her porch with a little booklet of where she writes her poetry, and she'll sit on the porch for 2 hours waiting for the sun to rise or whatever and write whatever she thought
Mm-hmm.
of at that time. And that's 2 hours
Mm-hmm.
to herself. She doesn't look at
Mm-hmm.
her phone. She leaves everything inside and
Mm-hmm.
she sits there for 2 hours doing that. And it's like just small, consistent things like that are what make work life balance so much more achievable.
Well, and you're never going to achieve balance if you don't plan. And
Exactly.
it's even as simple as like planning what you're going to have for the week for dinner so that you're not running to grab a meal or what are we going to have
Hmm.
or I don't have the groceries or I can't make this. I mean, if you're running a household, putting together a meal plan, putting together, okay, I also need to have some snacks. I know when my kids were little, we would buy snacks and I would prepare them on Sunday night. Here's all the carrots I put together. Here's the celery. Here's all the other things, cuties or oranges. Or I used to do even where my kids love, well, one of my kids loved the little beef sticks rolled in cheese. And I'd put like 30 of those together and stick them in a bag because I had time right then to do it.
Hmm.
And then my kids aren't saying, well, I'm hungry and I don't have anything to eat. And then I have to stop what I'm doing, or my husband had to stop what he was doing to make the kids a snack. You say, I'm going to empower you by getting all these things ready. And then at the end of the week, this is important too. And I know nobody likes to be lectured to. When you buy new groceries, you got to purge all those old groceries, right?
Hmm.
Otherwise, you can't find anything. If your pantry isn't organized, you can't find anything. If you don't take care of your dishes at the end of every meal. You don't stick them in the dishwasher or rinse them out in the sink. It's that concept of take 1 minute to do something to
Don't be the
prevent
bad
4 hours
roommate,
of
guys.
work
Don't be the
later.
bad roommate.
Yeah, it amazes me, and you need to organize your personal life as well as your professional life. I mean, I get frustrated when someone says, "Oh my God, I'm running late because I had to get gas this morning." Okay, you didn't notice last night as you were headed home that you needed gas so that you could plan to get here a
Hmm.
little bit earlier. Now, I had a flat tire. Completely, you could
Yeah, you could control
that you
that.
can't
Yeah.
control. But there are so many things that you can control, and once you control them, now I'm not saying that I have never gotten into my car and been like, "Crap, I'm gonna have to get gas. I forgot last night. I wasn't paying any attention. I was actually driving home the other day. I had 70 miles to go, and my little light came on and said I had 20 miles, and I didn't know if I was anywhere near a gas station. So those things do happen, but by planning time in, you can manage those
You
and
can
take care of them
minimize
in the
those
moment.
situations as
So that
well.
then you can spend time watching your movies or your TV or reading your book or whatever, or schedule it. That's the one thing I
Hmm.
loved about that Franklin Covey. I think you can go out and Google it. They're probably still material, but you would schedule your day. You scheduled your personal morning time, your work time. You scheduled your, what I was going to do here. You took your notes there, and then you had your evening. And the concept back in the 90s was, we want you to have better balance. Yes, we were even talking about work life balance back then. And to do that, we think it's a holistic approach.
I think that's a great way to end this
Yeah, we're
episode,
way
kind of
late.
giving some advice on how to manage things as well
So that
as
you
work
can
life
have a
balance. Yeah,
better,
yeah, yeah.
it's not somebody else's responsibility. You've got to figure out
You
how to
have to
do
figure
that.
it out. But all that being said, thank you for watching this episode. As we said last time, if you have any topics you want us to talk about, feel free to tell us on our social medias, which you can find in the description below on YouTube or on podcast. You can find us at Faux Prod on Twitter, faux_prod, FAUX_PROD.
Oh, that's a lot.
Um, what?
That's a lot.
FAUXW_PROD. Well, hey,
Anyway,
you couldn't take productions, apparently. It was
okay,
already
okay.
taken. So, but anyway, you can add us there and things of that nature. And we will see you all next week for our next episode of Seriously?
Hmm.
See you all next time.
Bye.